listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation? Welcome into our Week 8 preview episode. This time presented with 10% less dad jokes.
Lies.
Whoa, no, we're going to try. We're going to make an
You
effort
might
on this
be
episode,
trying.
Jeff.
I'm not trying to do that. I don't think you should put promises in my mouth, Murphy.
Mine either. I'm going to go for 20% more if you're going for 10% less. We'll make these numbers balance out.
Oh, God. All right, guys, let's dive into this show. I want to do that fill in the blank thing again. I want to start trying that more often. Fill in the blank here. Checking free agency after waivers run is blank.
Smart.
The most important thing you can do on a Wednesday morning or late Tuesday night.
See.
Yes. Those are the answers I was looking for. I have talked to about 4 or 5 people from our Facebook group this week who didn't really realize that was an option. And it just blows my mind. I got Aaron Rodgers for free after waivers ran 1 week. I mean, there are gems there almost every week if you're trying to find them.
I happen to wake up in the middle of the night, potentially just to use the restroom. It was about 4 a.m.-ish. I decided to go ahead and check free agency right then. I laid back down in bed, grabbed my phone, checked free agency, and all my leagues went back to sleep.
You don't have to lie, Jeff. I am proud to admit that I've woken up at like 1:30 in the morning just to roll over, check my phone. Oh, I got the waiver guy, and then go back right to sleep.
Oh, I do the same
You
thing.
got to pretend you got it for the bathroom.
I edit the Roto Bros podcast on Tuesdays, so I'm always up when they process, so I just watch them process. This week was really exciting because it was like the how much did everybody spend on Ty Johnson game. The answer was not that much in a couple of leagues and $90+ in the rest of them.
Oh, good gravy.
I wouldn't have spent that much. 50% was my line on him.
Is it spiteful and awful that I kind of hope he flops just to stick it to some people?
I'm really just praying for a Kenyon Drake trade, man.
Oh, God, we need it. Well, the thing is that trade's got to be worth it. And I don't know that anyone's going to give up what's worth it for Miami to actually trade him because they're going to get the compensatory pick if they just let him walk in the offseason.
Yeah, but how much is he going to get paid? Like, is that a 5th round compensatory pick probably?
I thought it was going to be a 4 because he was a 2nd round pick.
It depends on the contract that he signs for, though. And they won't get it until the next year.
Right. That's fair. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what he signs, I guess. With this draft class, it may not be much. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Enough of your hypothetical trades, guys. Let's dive into some news. There were some real trades.
News and notes from across the NFL.
All right. So first trade up is the Broncos. They traded wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders and a 2020 5th round pick to the Niners in exchange for a 3rd and 4th round pick in 2020. Our teams, guys, this is the fantasy takeaway trade right here.
I mean, I love this. As a 49ers fan, I'm really excited that we got, he may not be the difference maker that he might have been in his 20s, but he's not exactly over the hill either. And he's going to provide good veteran leadership for guys like Pettis and Debo. And as a 49ers fan, I mean, giving up a 3 and a 4 and getting a 5 back, I mean, those are probably going to be pretty late picks, or at least we like to think they are. I feel good about it.
Yeah, I think it's a good trade for both teams because the Broncos aren't winning anything this year. They're getting some draft capital out of the thing. The 49ers aren't giving away all the draft capital. They're still getting that 5th round pick back. So that 4th and 5th round pick could conceivably be only like 9 to 10 picks apart if San Francisco goes deep into the playoffs. The Broncos are going to win some more football games this year, but they're probably a top 10 pick at worst. So it looks good for both teams. My concerns here are that, is this going to make San Francisco throw the ball more? Because they've only thrown the ball on 43% of their plays this year.
No, I don't think it is. I think what's going to happen is George Kittle, Dante Pettis, and these other kind of number 3, number 4 level receivers that we trot out there every week are just going to see less looks. There's going to be a whole lot less out there for the Marquise Goodwins of the class here, Kendrick Bourne, etc. Not taking anything away from those guys. They've been great contributors for us, but they're not Emmanuel Sanders. And Sanders is the kind of guy that's going to help us in the postseason. We really need his savvy over the middle of the field with Kittle. And I'm really excited to see what he can bring in terms just as a veteran with that group because we're so young at the position.
I think there is a world where they do throw the ball just a little bit more because they're going to be more efficient doing it with Emmanuel Sanders. He fits Jimmy Garoppolo's semi-limited skill set pretty well. But man, like that's a little backhanded compliment.
Jimmy Jab. Jimmy Jab. Or that's an official name now. We're going to call it that. Jimmy Jab.
Jimmy Jab. But no, I think that this is a good move. I do have a little bit of concern that it might impact George Kittle a little bit if they're fighting for targets in the same space in the field. And I think that, there could be one receiver that emerges as the number 2 receiver in this offense that has some streaming value in really good matchups. But man, they got to throw the football more to make these weapons consistently reliable.
Yeah, and I don't know that we can trust Shanahan to do that right now. And the only reason why I say that is because we don't have a Julio Jones in this group. We don't have an elite level alpha style receiver. And Emmanuel Sanders is a guy that I like quite a bit as a player, but he's not really that alpha dog. He's going to be a really useful guy who's going to help us over the middle. He's going to provide great volume. He's just going to be a really good player for us. I just don't see him as being that guy that's going to command enough looks to force us very far off 43%. Maybe we tick up 1-2%. It may not be enough to really pump the needle. I just think that some of the other guys will get phased out.
I think that the counter argument to that says they may throw the ball a little bit more is that since Kyle Juszczyk went down, that running game has lost a ton of efficiency. That he was a very, very important player to that running game. So as long as he's out, we may see a relatively substantial uptick in the passing game. It kind of just depends on if that defense can maintain the pace that they've been on all season.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions here, and I feel like we've been seeing these questions all year with the 49ers. They're 6-0, but I still see us as the 49ers and the Patriots both, I feel like are kind of soft 6-0s. They're soft undefeated. There's holes on both teams. And I mean, you could be completely correct. We could ratchet up to 50% maybe.
That would be ideal. 50% is kind of the line you want to see it at if these passing weapons are going to be consistently reliable.
Yeah, and if we get up to 50%, then Kittle remains a top flight tight end option. You're talking about Emmanuel Sanders as a wide receiver 2 for fantasy. You've got a streamable option in Pettis or Deebo Samuel. There's suddenly a lot of utility in that offense. But then that also begs the question, what's Jimmy G's fantasy value?
I think it's certainly better either way now because he doesn't have a reliable wide receiver up until Emmanuel Sanders walks in the door.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, next up, the Falcons have sent wide receiver Mohamed Sanu to the Patriots for a second-round pick. Guys, the biggest thing I see with this trade as far as in our Facebook group on Twitter, do y'all think Mohamed Sanu is worth a second-round pick?
No.
Maybe.
Placid maybe?
Oh, man, it's semi-soft over here, I'll tell you that. No, so here's where we're at. And I'm saying this mostly as kind of a joke, right? Mohamed Sanu is not just going to be their wide receiver 2 or 3 or 4, whatever that's going to work out as. He's also their number 2 quarterback.
I'm so tired of that narrative. Shut up.
I just got a chuckle out of it online. We all know that's not true. I just laughed at that when I saw it on Twitter this morning. I got a good chuckle out of it. But no, Mohamed Sanu for what's going to effectively be the 63rd or 64th pick, arguably right now. I mean, the Patriots always show up in the playoffs. It's going to be a late 2. It's effectively a 3. It's a guy they're familiar with in terms of his background from Rutgers. I just think Belichick believes in him. They don't need him to show up and be Randy Moss. They need him to show up and complement Julian Edelman and potentially do some of what Edelman does over the middle with Edelman banged up. And he can do that. He'll be a useful cog in the Patriots machine, and that's what Bill wants.
I think this moves Julian Edelman to the outside a lot more than he was before because Mohamed Sanu is a much, much more effective wide receiver inside playing slot. It kind of strikes me as one of those moves where, because this happened before the Emmanuel Sanders trade, right?
It did.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
That doesn't make sense to me. Like, why didn't they go get Emmanuel Sanders? Emmanuel Sanders is efficient on the inside. He's efficient on the outside. He's not a typecast slot receiver. And I think they could have gotten him for probably a little bit cheaper.
I wonder if moving the second round pick had less to do with the draft capital and something to do with the draft slot salary cap positioning that they're going to be in. Because Tom Brady's a free agent technically in 2020. He did put his house on the market, and they've got a few other guys that are going to have to re-up, and they've been pretty close to the edge of the salary cap for the last few years. And then Tom Brady's taken a huge discount to allow them to do the things they've done. I kind of wonder if they said, hey, look, we can get him for a 3, but if we do it for a 2, it's going to save us a few bucks and we can pump those dollars back into player X. I don't know. I'm speculating. I haven't pulled up the salary cap numbers, but that feels like when someone overpays like that, I assume that that's what they're trying to do.
I could see it from Bill.
What does this do for Calvin Ridley is the question, because Calvin Ridley had a low target share for the player that most of us think he is. Sanu was getting a ton of targets. Do we see a little bit more of Calvin Ridley in the slot? Do we see him getting more weighted opportunity in this offense? And do we see him getting some of those less weighted targets over the middle?
I really hope so, because if they start funneling these looks just to Julio, then it's a real disservice to the offense.
I feel like there's another person this helps a little bit too.
Maybe Hurts though too. You're talking about Austin Hooper, right?
I am, yes.
So there's an argument to be made that they were fighting over targets in the same position on the field. But there's also an argument to be made that Austin Hooper is getting a massive target share, and if you're an opposing defense, you're going to throw a linebacker out there to bracket him in coverage. So who knows? Maybe his efficiency goes down. I'm not sure. I think it could be good for him, but I think there's also a world where his target share goes down.
Fair enough.
It'll be interesting to watch. The next 2 to 3 weeks are going to be really interesting for fantasy because a lot of our trade deadlines are coming up. And there's some fantasy relevant players that are getting shaken up a little bit. In this case, we're looking at guys like Emmanuel Sanders. We're looking at Calvin Ridley. We're looking at not just the players being dealt, but the subsequent players left behind after the trade.
I think maybe we should go back and talk about one of those guys in the previous trade too, Courtland Sutton. Like, what does this do for Courtland Sutton? In terms of efficiency, his numbers go down over the last 2 years with Emmanuel Sanders off of the field, but his target share goes up, and it seems like he is a little bit better wide receiver this year than he was last year. So I think that's another one of those question marks that we don't really know the answer to, but he could end up getting 10 targets a game from here on out. That wouldn't be all that surprising.
What if those touches, because it's 6 targets a game is about where Emmanuel is at, give or take? About 66 targets and 65 air yards?
Over the last 2 seasons, Emmanuel Sanders has 7.42 targets per game. I'm not really sure about the air yards. I don't have that data in front of me, but receiving yards, he's leaving about 65 receiving yards per game on the table when he walks out the door.
I wonder if those numbers are split between Sutton and either Deshaun Hamilton or Noah Fant.
Juwan Winfrey!
You love Juwan Winfrey?
Dude, he's good. He's actually a good football player. I think that's part of the reason why they made this trade. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders was a guy that was obviously on the block because he's a free agent next year, but
right.
I think they like Juwan Winfrey. There's a lot of buzz about him here.
What happened to Deshaun? As a rookie, it seemed like he had a role. They were talking about him being the replacement for Emmanuel, and Cortland was going to replace Demarius, and that's kind of what that whole narrative was. And then Deshaun seemed to have evaporated. I don't know what happened.
I think he's an okay player. He's certainly going to take on some of that slot role, but Emmanuel Sanders wasn't playing that much of that role anyway, and Deshaun Hamilton was already in it. The biggest problem for Hamilton is he lets passes hit him in the face instead of catching him with his hands.
Ah, yes.
Touchdown passes.
Yeah, it's face maskiitis.
Yeah.
So it's an inflammation of the face mask around the football.
10% less, gentlemen. 10% less.
Nope.
I got more coming. Don't you worry.
Oh, God.
Injury Roundup.
All right, let's change up the format on this a little bit. We're going to start with the players that are on IR. That's Kerryon Johnson. He's eligible to return in week 16 with that knee injury. And Josh Gordon, who's been dealing with several minor injuries along with his knee injury, apparently is the reason they're doing this. But they've also reported that Josh Gordon will be released after he is cleared from IR. So his time as a Patriot's over anyway.
Yeah, I think both of these guys are droppable in most formats. I'm still holding on to, obviously, Kerryon Johnson in Dynasty, but Josh Gordon is a guy, like, his best attribute was speed, and he's not a fast receiver anymore. So is he going to even get picked up anywhere? Like, I don't really think he's a good football player anymore.
I feel like somewhere will give him the chance because he's able to keep his act clean at least for a year or two. They might go, okay, let's take the risk. The Patriots have done a lot of PR to kind of help him a bit. So I think we'll get a chance somewhere else. I don't know if I'll make a roster, but he'll at least get a chance.
He's so naturally talented. And it just kills me to have seen the way this guy's career tailspun out of control with all of his substance problems and everything else. I got to believe he gets a second chance somewhere. It wouldn't surprise me if it was a place like, the Raiders with Gruden, they're going to be in Vegas, give me a big name guy that can go out there and line up on the outside. because after the Antonio Brown fiasco, they still need a body. Tyrell Williams isn't the alpha dog. You know, I'm not saying Josh Gordon can be, but they can get him cheap. He'll come at a veteran minimum. So I expect him to get picked up somewhere next season.
All right, on to players that are out. We've got Chris Thompson, Ito Smith, Vernon Davis, and Cammie Newtown. Throw back to the league.
Devonta Freeman season?
I mean, I hope so. I'd like that for him.
I traded away all my Freeman shares, but I think that, like, if Ito Smith misses a ton of time, like, this was a serious concussion that he suffered. I think he got carted off the field.
Yeah.
So this is a situation where Devonta Freeman could be seeing really elevated snap counts and really elevated target. His target share with Sanu's off the field has gone up. So he's a guy that's even affected by the trade we talked about earlier. I think that Freeman could be a candidate to buy low right now.
Maybe. This whole offense just looks completely out of whack. I've been watching them for a few weeks now, and even when they're doing well and putting up yards and points, like, they still just look really disjointed. They don't seem to have, and I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but over the last 3 or 4 years, even during the Sarkisian seasons, they looked more together than they do now. And I don't
mention the name on the show, Jeff. I'm done with you.
That's
I hate that.
That's
man.
Murphy's trigger word. I don't know if you knew that.
He's my Rick Dennison.
I'll be more careful. But he who shall remain nameless ran a smoother offense than what we're seeing right now out of Atlanta, and it's affecting everybody. The O-line is still shaky at best. Matt Ryan doesn't appear to be playing the way Matt Ryan does play. I want Freeman to do well because I did invest in him when everybody was running from him in the offseason. And it really hasn't panned out to this point. So, yeah, I hope it is Freeman season, but I'm not holding out a lot of hope based on just some of the disjointedness I feel like I'm seeing in that whole group.
Let's put this into a more literal context. I have a team where Christian McCaffrey is my running back 1, and Devin Singletary, Miles Sanders, Daria Gumbawale, Chris Thompson, those are the guys that I'm looking at my running back 2 position. On the flip side of that coin, I have Allen Robinson, Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, Tyrell Williams, Auden Tate, with Devontae Adams currently sitting on the IR. Is that a situation where you go out and you trade one of those wide receivers for a Devonta Freeman and try and get him low?
Yeah, and that's part of roster construction, right? So I think right now you're not going to find a lot of other available running backs unless someone's just stacked at the position. But whoever's got Freeman probably has him on the bench anyway. You know, so you might be able to go out and buy him pretty cheap at that point.
Where's your line out of those players? Calvin Ridley? Like, I don't think you could get him for a Tyrell Williams with that foot injury.
Yeah, you can't trade damaged goods. If it's Tyrell Williams, it's got to be like Williams plus another player. You know, and then you might have to pick up some trash at the bottom of that guy's roster. So it gets to be kind of a messy trade. Maybe it's Ridley, but it would really depend on the other guy's roster too.
He's wide receiver needy in this league. So I think I could get him for Calvin Ridley. Is that a trade you'd make?
Yeah, if I'm that desperate for a running back, I think I would.
Fair. Me too.
All right, next up, the players that did not participate on Wednesday's practice that are kind of trending in the wrong direction, likely to be out, but not confirmed yet. We've got David Johnson, Matt Ryan, Will Fuller, Dede Westbrook, Malcolm Brown, Jared Cook, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, OJ Howard, and Delaney Walker. I laugh because, Joe, in the script here you wrote, he did next to OJ Howard, and your voice popped in my head.
With a question mark. It was a question mark. There was a question mark on his teleprompter.
He did. He did? Dude, I'm really wondering, like, do we just drop OJ Howard now? Like, in Dynasty, I think you have to hold him just in case he gets traded somewhere else. But even in deeper leagues, he's starting to seem like an unviable asset for fantasy.
The Patriots showed up and tried to trade for him. They offered, and the Bucs said no, he's not available. So they're not planning on trading him, but I did buy a gallon of milk yesterday and his picture was on the side. So he's definitely missing. We don't know where this guy is right now. Yeah, I think OJ's droppable. He was actually dropped in my league of record last week, and then he was picked up again this week. Same guy dropped him and then repicked him back up. And he's probably the only guy in the league that believes in him at this point.
What about Dede Westbrook? Did he get hurt during the game? I didn't see anything from him, and all of a sudden he's did not participate in practice.
I'm just, and I'm speculating here, but Doug Marrone in this play calling is probably a pain in Dede Westbrook's neck.
Shut up. But no, D.D. Westbrook is one of those guys on the rise. Like I make this spreadsheet every week that has all of the air yards risers and all of the air yards market share risers. And he's one of those players that's showing up on that list consistently week after week. So he's the guy that's getting more downfield usage as they employ more of this offense with Gardner Minshew throwing the football. It's really, it kind of sucks if he's going to miss because he's one of those players that I think is flying under the radar right now.
Yeah, that's one of those things you're going to have to keep really close tabs on because, when I was calculating out my ratings for the last, a few days here, I was noticing the same thing you were with the air yards where he was getting more and more of a share of that offense. His opportunity share in that offense was climbing steadily every week, and DJ Chark is starting to drop off the side of the earth. Chark needs touchdowns, where Westbrook, he's just making a ton happen with a bunch of catches. And, they're throwing it to him downfield, which matters. I don't expect this neck thing is that big of a deal considering how quietly it popped up, but we definitely want to keep tabs on it over the next few days.
Here's another question. New Orleans plays Arizona this week, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Arizona is terrible against tight ends. If Jared Cook misses, are you considering streaming Josh Hill? He got a really nice target share last week.
I literally told somebody to do that yesterday. I said, if you can get Jared Cook off the free agency, do that. If not, Hill.
If I'm New Orleans, I'm sitting anybody that's borderline questionable this week because they have the bye week next week. So Brees, Kamara, Cook, I'm sitting all of them. And to answer your question, if Cook sits, yes, I'd be willing to go out and take a flyer on Hill. And if he's the one who's playing, I will absolutely have him in probably 2 or more DFS lineups.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have him in our cheap dates, but he would be there if we knew Cook was out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to keep the cheap dates as close as I can to guys that I know are going to either be playing or not be impacted by an injury as best I can.
All right, moving on to players that were limited or doubtful but are moving in the right direction. Christian Kirk, AJ Green, Devontae Adams, Paris Campbell, Rex Burkhead, Drew Brees, Sterling Shepard, Chris Herndon, and Tyro Williams. AJ Green and Drew Brees are the ones that really stick out for me. Devontae Adams obviously as well, but let's start with AJ Green. Do you guys think he plays this week?
No. He's listed as doubtful. I think he's still, because they have a bye next week. So I think he comes back after the bye. He might get traded before that too. We don't know.
I don't think the Bengals are interested in trading AJ Green, although they should. They absolutely should. They should be cutting him loose and anybody else in the contract that they're not necessarily going to throw money at and just blow him out because this season's a lost year. They should be going into full-on evaluation mode and let that guy go compete for a championship somewhere.
Hashtag tank for a top 5.
I don't think they have to put a lot of effort into it at this point because they haven't already.
The Bengals would be stupid not to trade AJ Green. Like, he's an unrestricted free agent next year. He's gone.
I got to believe the 49ers called them up and potentially offered them a 1 to get him. It would not have surprised me at all. But obviously, the guy's got to pass a physical, and that's where I think any trade negotiations are getting really blocked up right now because I don't think anybody's looking for a 30, 31-year-old wide receiver, that you've got to give high draft capital for that may or may not pass a physical right now.
All right, so Drew Brees is the other big one that pops out to me. Do you think he plays this week, or like Jeff said earlier, do you think they just sit him one more week, go through the bye, then let him back at 100%?
We don't have a whole lot of information on how far he is along. We know that he was cleared to practice. I think he was cleared for contact as well, so that's a good sign. But if he's not 100% with the way that this team has been playing with Teddy Bridgewater, like Jeff said, I think they just sit him. But if he's 100%, you throw him out there. There's a big difference between this team run by Drew Brees and this team run by Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, there is a huge difference in the two teams with Bridgewater and with Brees, but Teddy has just gone so far above the expectations and above the Call of Duty in terms of getting wins and keeping this team at the top of the NFC South. I mean, realistically, they're looking at a first-round bye right now. Just pretty legit, considering we didn't really expect him to do that much. We were hoping for 500 at best. If I'm Sean Payton and the Saints, I'm saying, hey, look, I want Brees to practice in full. I want him going through all his normal reps. But if we can hold him off through the bye week and just get him ready for the stretch run, the guy's 40 years old. A 40-year-old body does not recover the way a 34-year-old body does. I can tell you that from personal experience. But I'd like to hold him back as best I can. I got to believe they're going to be cautious with him.
We crap on coaches all the time, but what Sean Payton has done with Teddy Bridgewater, like they're not running the same offense Drew Brees would run. They're running some of the same plays, but he's completely transformed this offense. It's been remarkable what they've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some of the same route concepts, which are good, but he's changed up the way the offense functions in terms of pace of play, blocking schemes, the whole bit. Drew's usually out there calling out all of the blocking assignments. He's the one setting protections and going through all that. They took all that off Teddy's plate so he could just drop back, make a read, and throw it. But Sean Payton has been absolutely unreal. I think that he should be in consideration for Coach of the Year. And we do crap on coaches quite a bit, but it's usually the same coaches. It's usually the same 2 to 4 guys, and we wonder how these guys get jobs time after time after time. But Sean Payton is one of those elite or near elite coaches that I don't think it matters what franchise he goes to. He will still turn that team into a winner.
All right, and finally, the guys likely to play: Jimmy Graham, Marquise Valdez-Scantling, Sammy Watkins, Philip Dorsett, Julian Edelman, and Saquon Barkley. Tom Brady gets his entire receiving core back. Woo!
His entire receiving core. Put big quotes on that one. Like, they don't really have a receiving core. Philip Dorsett is kind of a bad player.
I mean, but they just got Mohamed Sanu, man.
Mohamed Sanu is a good football player on that team. But I don't know how great he is. Like, he's just an okay guy.
Yeah, here's the thing. They just need a couple of dudes that are they're just dudes. They're not anything special. But, I look at this and I'm like, hey, Julian Edelman's obviously the big one for the Patriots. Saquon likely to play. He didn't look like himself last week. MVS, I hope they hold him back another week because his wheels didn't appear quite there, even though he played pretty well on Sunday. It's an interesting group.
I hope Saquon is back all the way to 100%, but it looked like he suffered a little setback with that ankle in that game.
Yeah, he didn't look quite right. And I've got Saquon in 2 spots, and it makes me nervous.
Cheap dates.
All right, cheap dates time. It is our DFS lineups for the week with our cheap date players included. Jeff, we're starting with you. Tell us about your cheap date lineup.
All right, so for the first time in a few weeks, I'm actually a little excited about my lineup. This might be a group that I'll even run in its entirety in potentially more than one contest. So at quarterback, I'm going Mason Rudolph. Looks like he's going to be the guy this week for Pittsburgh. They're playing Miami. I'll take it. Miami's basically a JV squad at this point. I'll take anybody playing them. Took Alexander Madison as my cheap running back, 4,500. I went a little different here. I took both Viking running backs. This game against the Redskins is probably going to be fairly ugly, but I expect the running backs to do a lot of damage in it. The Redskins have the 23rd worst rushing defense or some ridiculous stat where basically running backs run all over them. They allow a ton of fantasy points to running backs. So I'm going to take both of those guys, looking for 3 touchdowns between the 2 of them. Went A.J. Brown, Kenny Stills, and D-Hop as my wide receivers. Brown and Stills both qualify for the cheap dates moniker. Luke Wilson at tight end. Taking Len Fournette, who I paid up for in the flex, and the Chargers defense.
I like a lot of these plays. That thing you said about Washington cannot be overstated. They have 3 flex plays against the Patriots in week 5. That is astonishing. They had 3 players inside the top 36 again against Miami at the running back position in week 6. I mean, last week was that crazy outlier rain game, so you really can't say all that much about that one, but you're looking at high ceilings here too. Like Wayne Gallman, when he got the bulk of the workload, 29.8 points, and that's without the DraftKings bonuses. It was even more than that on DK. So I think that playing both of those guys is totally a viable play here, especially considering Madison's price.
Right. I mean, at 4,500, it's hard to pass up on, especially if he comes in and does give us a touchdown. Because even if he only goes, let's just say it's 65 and a touch, and maybe he kicks in 1 or 2 catches, that's not a bad day. I mean, I'll take that.
I think Kenny Stills is one of the free squares this week, too. At 4,700, look at the price that Will Fuller was last week. He was 6,300, I believe, on DraftKings. So you're looking at a guy that's playing the same role that might even be a better football player for $1,600 less.
Yeah, absolutely. When Fuller went down, it hurt me in a few leagues because I was pretty invested in him. But seeing the Kenny Stills opportunity has me jumping all over him. I grabbed him wherever I could, and I'm definitely plugging him into DFS lineups considering his price.
All right, Joe, it's your turn. What's your lineup looking like this week?
Well, I reserve the right to change this lineup because we did learn that Sam Darnold had a toenail removed this week. So they said that he's just going to be limited early in practice. We'll see how that goes. It could get ugly, but for now, I have Sam Darnold in my lineup. In week 6, he was a great football player. People are forgetting about this, but he had 338 and 2 for 19.6 points. He's priced down pretty well at 5,500. Look at what this Jags defense has given up lately. 27.1 to Joe Flacco, 27.1 to Andy Dalton. Like, these are massive scores for mediocre players. And I think that Sam Darnold can replicate that if he's even close to 100%. Ty Johnson, I think Ty Johnson is a free square this week. New York is allowing a ton of points to their running back position. Ty Johnson played 64% of the snaps in week 7. I just got some early projections into my projection model, and right now I have him at $360 per point on DK. I think that's a pretty good number. It's one of the best on the slate. I also have Dalvin Cook. We already mentioned what that Washington defense has been allowing to running backs. Robbie Anderson is my cheap date wide receiver. I like the stack with Sam Darnold. Anderson averages almost twice as many PPR points when Darnold's in the lineup as opposed to without him. The Jags have allowed 28 explosive pass plays this year. That means they're vulnerable to deep shots down the field. Robbie Anderson, that's his game. Tyler Lockett, I don't really think we need to mention too much more about Tyler Lockett. He's one of those plug and play guys, and at 7,000, I think he could easily hit value for you. 21% target share. He's on pace to do some special things this year. DeAndre Hopkins is a guy that I absolutely love against Oakland. Let me just pull up some numbers here about what the Oakland Raiders have allowed. 19.6 points to Emmanuel Sanders, 19 to Cortland Sutton in the same game. DeMarcus Robinson scored 35 plus. Adam Thielen, 20 plus. Allen Robinson, 25 plus. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 21 plus. Jake Kumaro had 13 points in that game. This is a matchup that I think DeAndre Hopkins is going to be able to absolutely exploit. After that, I have Jake Hollister. Jake Hollister had 6 targets in week 7. I don't think this is a fantastic play. I actually like Murphy's cheap date tight end better, so stay tuned for that. But I do think that he's going to get some volume, and there's a ton of touchdown upside against Atlanta. Tyler Boyd's only $5,100 this week. He's crapped the bed 2 weeks in a row, but he's done so with a 26% target share on the season. So I don't love Tyler Boyd as a floor play. I'm not putting him in my cash lineup, but I think there's plenty of upside there at that price. And then the Lions defense. The Giants have been turning the ball over like crazy. The Giants are only 2,800 on DraftKings. The Giants have allowed to opposing DSTs 8 or more points in each of the last 5 weeks. So right there, you're looking at right at 3x at the minimum over the last 5 weeks for this defense.
You've got a lot of points sitting in your wide receiver group right now. Like when I look at that group, I'm like Boyd, Anderson, Lockett, Hopkins. Woo. The Ty Johnson thing does scare me. He's basically a free square at 4,900. You got to kind of use him, especially he's the new toy. What do you think his ownership's going to look like, though? Especially if you're looking at, say, it's everyone's going to be on him.
He's the chalk, but I think, honestly, he might be chalk you can eat at that price because he's going to be getting the volume. The efficiency probably won't be there. You're looking for a touchdown, and I don't mind pivoting because there are some good plays in that price range at the running back position. But I think in cash, he's just a must play.
Fair enough. And that's, Sam Darnold, when he got that toe removed, did it have any impact on his ability to see dead people?
No. Did I say toe? He had a toenail removed.
Toenail removed. Oh, I didn't say toe removed. I thought I said toenail. No. Sorry, I haven't started drinking yet. I'm already slurring my speech.
No, thank God he didn't have his toe removed. I wouldn't be playing him at all this week.
Hey, Ronnie Lott cut a finger off and came back into that game.
That was a different era, Jeff. Different era of football. Hangnails did not affect players back then.
That's true.
All right, guys, let's finish up here with my lineup. At quarterback, I started Joe Flacco. I'm not really excited about this, but I don't feel like it's going to be bad. Joe, you mentioned in the pre-show that you think we might need to up our quarterback prices because it's just so hard to find guys you're not throwing darts at below 5,000. And it's kind of where I'm at with this one. Tevin Coleman at 5,000 is my cheap date running back. I still have a lot of faith in that San Francisco running game. I know that Juszczyk being out is hurting it, but this is kind of one of those games where I feel like Tevin Coleman could do a solid 15 to 20 points. I just have that in my gut. We're all 3 for 3 on Dalvin Cook. Nothing else need to be said there. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is my cheap date wide receiver. I just feel like even if Adams plays, he'll be a little bit limited. I think that Marquez has proven that he can get 100 yards and a touchdown off of 2 receptions if necessary. And this game, I feel like could be high scoring, or it could be a game that Green Bay puts out of the way really early. And I feel like he could get a touchdown in that. Chris Godwin, I went with him against the Titans this week. I mean, it's Chris Godwin. I'm not really sure the defense matters because he's just that good. So I felt like paying up for that. Tyler Lockett, we've already talked about him. Jonnu Smith is my tight end. The Bucs defense has been kind of imploding a little bit. They're still solid, but they weren't nearly as good as they looked earlier in the season. And Jonnu Smith had a great game last week. I feel like he's going to build on that. The trust is there between him and Tannehill. So it's just, I feel like a good play. Kenny Golladay. Joe, you mentioned the Lions are a good defense this week. The Giants are not a good defense. And I feel like this game could become a high scoring affair. And I think Kenny Golladay is going to get his in that. And then the Seahawks defense rounds it out because they play Atlanta, who may or may not have Matt Ryan. So just felt pretty good.
Yeah, they don't really have an offensive line either. I think that Seahawks play is fine at 2,800. I think Kenny Golladay is priced too low. I think Kenny Golladay is a nice, shrewd play here because the matchup is fantastic. And a lot of people after last week are going to be forgetting about Kenny Golladay. The Marvin Jones outlier weeks are going to happen. That's just what happens in this Detroit Lions offense. So I think Kenny Golladay is ripe for a bounce back. Jonnu Smith is a guy I want to talk about. I mentioned during my segment that I think he's the best I think he might be the best tight end play on the slate this week. He was fantastic last week. And if he's the only tight end in that offense, like Pro Football Focus had him ranked elite. He had a 90+ grade on Pro Football Focus for week 7. I like Jonnu Smith a lot. He's a player that I'm going to have in a ton of lineups.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all actually have pretty decent lineups this week. The one thing I'll look at is Tevin Coleman, though. This Panthers defense is a little stingy. They're not elite against running backs, but they're stingy enough where it may not be Coleman making the noise. It might be Breida catching little passes here and there out of the backfield, and that's where the running back points start to come from. So if you run this lineup, I might run it twice. I might run it once with Coleman, once with Breida.
Yeah, I'm not against that. I just feel like Coleman gets a little bit more passing down work. I mean, there's no evidence to go with that. Breida's getting plenty of passing down work as well, but it's a gut feeling. I was actually worried you guys were going to roast me for this lineup because half of it is my gut, and I don't do that every week, but some weeks it pays off, and I feel like this is one of those weeks where it's going to pay off.
Yeah, I mean, the only play on here that I'm like, I just kind of got to shake my head at, but I can't because it's our own rules that impede us, is Joe Flacco.
Yeah,
I just
it was a dart throw.
Yeah, I have no faith in that guy to do anything ever except for disappoint us.
Hey, man, I got 28 Andy Dalton last week. There are crazier things.
There are crazier things. And the defensive matchup is not terrible against Indianapolis. On the road, actually, Joe Flacco's played better on the road this year than at home, so.
He's got something against the altitude. Bad for his constitution.
God, that Joe Cool thing, man. Like, he pisses me off so bad. He sits there on the sideline when the offense isn't moving the ball at all and just has this like blank stare on his face like he doesn't give a crap.
Oh, he's got the Jay Cutler?
He doesn't have like the Smokin' Jay look where he's like actively indifferent to what's happening in the football game. It's like a passive indifference. And I think almost that might be worse.
And to be fair, Joe Montana was Joe Cool. Joe Flacco is not Joe Cool.
This Joe Cool thing is like a negative. Like, he's so cool under terrible circumstances. Like, care, Joe, care.
Yeah, just care.
Guys, he's Wacko Flacco, not Joe Cool.
That's way more accurate.
Wacko Flacco.
Yeah, but that implies that he like is animated, like the wavy, whacking inflatable tube arm man guy. Joe Flacco is not animated. He's a statue on the sidelines and in the pocket. Yeah, we're going to raise QBs to 6K next week. I think it'll make it a lot easier to make better lineups here.
Well, should we just go to 5,500? Or no, we're at 55.
It's already 55. We'll just go to 6K.
Take it to 6K. Okay, that makes sense. All right, cool.
All right, gentlemen, may the best, not Joe, win.
Hey.
Oh, you thought it was done. It's not. All right, guys, let's move on to our Thursday night preview.
Thursday night preview. Vikings versus Redskins.
All right, Thursday night, the Vikings versus the Redskins. Players that are out, Adam Thielen and Chris Thompson. Questionable AP, who was limited on Wednesday, but he says he will play. Let's start with quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins and Case Keenum. This game feels pretty bleh. I mean, Thursday night games usually feel pretty bleh. We get surprised occasionally, but I'm really worried this is going to be one of those games I turn off at halftime. Kirk Cousins, let's start with him. Is he going to disappoint this week like Jeff thinks is going to happen? The come down.
I think there's certainly a world where Kirk Cousins only throws 10 passes in this game. Washington's not a good football team. Minnesota's defense is really, really pretty good. I think that they can slow down Washington pretty easily. Like, what does Washington have? Terry McLaurin? That's it. That's the only offensive weapon they have at this point. So I could see this being a real slog. 45 rushing attempts coming out for Minnesota. I'm not playing Kirk Cousins anywhere. I think he's a trap if you're streaming him. He could throw up 3 touchdowns in the first quarter and make that take look stupid, but he could also have 0 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook scores 3 and he gets you 9 points.
Yeah, I'm running Kirk Cousins in one lineup because I don't have any other options really. It's in the Scott Fish Bowl, I've got Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins. My other quarterbacks are Danny Dimes and Dwayne Haskins. So I'm going with Cousins this week. I'm really hoping I'm wrong here, but I have a sneaking suspicion. Yeah, it's going to be a low attempts game for him. 1 touchdown, 200-ish yards. It's going to be a really light week. Yeah, I think he still outperforms Case Keenum.
Me too.
But I just don't think he's going to be the Kirk Cousins we've seen the last 3 weeks. And he's got this thing where he kind of gets caught up in his own feelings a little bit. And I think the revenge narrative thing, I have a sneaking suspicion he's going to be trying to put on a show a little bit. And that may be enough to get him into some issues. He'll be a little mistake prone. No Adam Thielen out there. They can bracket Diggs. Suddenly the weapons aren't as good around him. A 1 touchdown, 2 interception night isn't outside of the realm of possibility.
All right, let's move on to the running backs. Adrian Peterson for the Redskins if he plays. Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison for the Vikings. If AP doesn't play, is there anybody worth playing for fantasy?
Nope. Wendell Smallwood is the next guy up, and no, don't play Wendell Smallwood. Not even as a DFS start throw.
Yeah, no, this game's going to be pretty ugly. I think it's going to be over, by halftime, if not the first half of the third quarter. And it's going to be the Dalvin Cook, Alexander Mattison. We might even get some Mike Boone love in this one.
Good. I can go to bed early. Get some rest. All right. On to the wide receivers. Stephon Diggs and Joe. Who's the other wide receiver for the Vikings right now?
Olabisi Johnson. I think he's the next man up, but we'll talk about him in the tight end segment. I think they might run 2 tight ends most of this game.
And for the Redskins, we've got Scary Terry and Trey Quinn.
McLaurin F1.
Scary Terry.
McLaurin F1.
You can have multiple nicknames, man.
I mean, you can. I mean, according to Twitter, you can't. We heard that already. But I'm just going to throw it out there that I know Mike Clay is in the F1 camp, so I feel validated now.
I feel like this is also a generational thing because Scary Terry's a Rick and Morty reference as well. I don't think you watch Rick and Morty. So
no, it's definitely a Terry Rozier reference. So we're going back the other way here. So, I mean, you can't give 2 NFL guys the exact same nickname.
I mean, you could. It's possible.
But it's wrong. It's flat out. It's wrong.
He who is most popular wins the nickname contest every time. And right now, it's Scary Terry McLaurin.
I want to play Terry McLaurin for fantasy if we want to talk about that. I think he's a pretty decent play.
No, Joe, this is not a fantasy podcast.
Fantasy Takeaway. That's the name. Look it up.
Lies. Fake news.
I'm fading Stephon Diggs in this game. I think that there are a lot better plays. I think if he's on your roster for redraft, you can throw him out there with a little bit of confidence. Just because if Kirk Cousins only attempts 10 passes, we could very well see 5 or 6 of them going to Stephon Diggs, and that could make your day if he scores a touchdown. I wouldn't be opposed to fading him if you're stacked at wide receiver, though.
That was for you, Murph. What you guys can't see is I just modified the script that we have that we can all look at during the show to change Scary Terry to McLaurin F1.
All right, moving on to tight ends. Kyle Rudolph versus Jeremy Sprinkle. But Joe, you've got some Irv Smith love. It doesn't have to be me this time. You say it this time.
Yeah, it sounds like they might run Irv Smith as a slot receiver in this game. They did a little bit of that last week, and it was pretty effective. So I think that we could see a much higher snap count for Irv Smith in this game and see him playing a less traditional tight end role and more of a receiver role. That could be good for fantasy, but it's a play that I'm not making in any of my lineups or in DFS just because we may only see 10 or 15 pass attempts. And if he only gets 2 of them, like if he doesn't score you a touchdown, it's a total poop the bed situation.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in wrecking my sheets, so I'm going to pass on that. But I do love the usage, and I think it's worth monitoring because if they are slotting him out and using him as a big slot or really moving him around and maintaining that move tight end kind of setup, we start seeing a lot of, 12 or even 22 personnel in this game, it's possible it carries over into subsequent weeks and Irv Smith becomes a guy you want to add. And this usage becomes what we really wish Tampa Bay would do with OJ Howard.
It fits what they're trying to do too, because you're technically running 2 tight ends at that point, and you can pull him in as a blocker if you want to run the football. So it does provide versatility in the way that they want to run this offense.
Absolutely. And you cannot run base if he's in there as a second tight end and then he splits out because a linebacker's not covering him. That's just not happening. So you're going to have to come out in nickel and you're going to have to come out in other looks that weakens your front. And the Vikings are going to have the advantage up front every time, which just means more blocked yards and then more yards after first contact for guys like Dalvin Cook, Alexander Mattison, and Mike Boone.
I think CJ Ham might be in that conversation too. He's been getting targeted in the red zone.
Yeah. I like it.
All right, so I can safely assume we're all 3 taking the Vikings?
Yeah. 10 of 10.
All right, then that'll do it for our Thursday night preview.
What to watch for?
First up, I'm going to be watching that Eagles-Bills game in the afternoon slate on Sunday. The Eagles are tough up front, so I'm not expecting much out of those Buffalo running backs, but I'm going to have my eye on John Brown and Josh Allen in the passing game. Philly has been getting burned on the back end all season, and with Allen's arm and Brown's speed, this could be a recipe for a fantasy bonanza in Buffalo.
My first game is Raiders versus Texans. With basically half of the season behind us, both of these teams look like they'll be jockeying for playoff position. If the season ended now, the Texans would be edging out the Raiders by a game. This game will tell us if the improved Raiders can hang with some of the better teams in the league.
1, 2, 3.
All right, so first one for me, Sunday in the early slate, I'll be watching the Chargers versus the Bears. Last week did not go well for the Chicago Bears, and for fantasy, there's still a lot of question marks around players like Cohen, Montgomery, and Robinson. This week, against a defense in LA that struggled a lot this season, can the Bears get right, or is it time to abandon ship for fantasy?
As a 49ers fan, you already know that I'm going to be glued to this game at 4:05 p.m. The 4-2 Panthers seem to be really clicking. Can they be the team to out the 49ers as phony at 6-0? A win here will go a long way to solidify their chances at a playoff berth and really call into question whether or not the team needs Cam Newton.
The Packers are coming off an explosive offensive performance, while the Chiefs may see what life looks like without Patrick Mahomes. Can the Kansas City defense do enough to keep themselves alive, or will Aaron Rodgers continue to destroy in fantasy? All I know for sure is this game could be real fun, or it could get real ugly real quick.
1, 2, 3.
On Sunday in the afternoon slate, I'll be watching the Browns travel to Foxborough to play the Pats. It's looking like that Patriots DST is going to get you quarterback level fantasy scoring out of a pay down position each and every week. And with Baker at the helm and that lackluster Cleveland O-line, this is looking like we're in for more of the same. I'm starting to seriously question whether this fantasy frenzy for this Pats defense will ever end.
All right, guys, that'll do it for our Week 8 preview. I tried to limit the jokes. I tried to limit the dad jokes, but they didn't let me. You guys suck.
I think it's good listening, man. I enjoy the dad jokes.
I mean, it just kind of breaks up a lot of, the serious talk we have to have. Like, don't play any of the tight ends in the Thursday night game. That's serious stuff we're talking about.
I think that's a rock solid take, too. That is the not flaccid take of the week.
Oh, dude, that is just raging hard.
Oh, God, come on.
All right, let's get out of here before we get too far into this one. For Joe at Human Stat Sheet on Twitter, for Jeff at NFL_DiMatteo, and of course for myself at MurphyFFT, or find us all in the NFL Fantasy Football Discussion Group on Facebook. Bye, guys.
Don't play your Thursday night players in the flex.
It's Scary Terry, Jeff. Deal with it.
Remember, kids, McLaurin F1 is the guy's nickname, and Mike Clay agrees. I'm not afraid to borrow power.
Shut up. Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.
McLaurin F1 is faster than Scary Terry.
Same player. That's stupid. You're fired.
They're not the same player.